Okay, so welcome to another deep dive, where we basically take a big stack of interesting stuff and pull out like the gold nuggets,
Yeah.
the bits that are going to really help you understand something quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about like finding those key insights so you can kind of get up to speed without having to wade through, mountains of information.
Exactly, and today we're diving in something a bit different. We found this really interesting conversation on YouTube. It's from this channel called LEP Learn English Podcast.
Ah, yeah, I've seen that one. It's great for English learners, but they also touch on some pretty deep topics sometimes.
Yeah, and this one really got us thinking. It's this conversation between a businessman named Holland and a guy named Jimmy who runs a bakery.
And what's interesting is, on the surface, Holland seems like he's, super successful.
Right, he's got it all figured out.
Yeah, but he keeps talking about how he feels like something's missing, like he's not really satisfied.
And then you have Jimmy who, runs this small bakery.
Mhm.
And he seems so genuinely happy with his life.
It's like a total contrast in perspectives.
Yeah, and that's what we want to unpack today. Like, what are these different mindsets?
Mhm.
What's making Holland feel so restless even though he's achieved so much? And how is Jimmy finding this contentment?
Right. And ultimately, how do these mindsets, these ways of looking at the world impact their definitions of success and happiness?
Yeah, and it all starts with this question that comes up right at the beginning of the conversation, and it's something I think a lot of us can relate to.
Hmm.
Have you ever worked really hard towards a goal? You finally get there, and it's just not as satisfying as you thought it would be.
Totally. It's like that feeling of, okay, what's next? You're always chasing that next thing.
Like you're on this treadmill that just keeps going faster and faster.
And that's where we see this really clear difference between Holland and Jimmy. Like right off the bat, Holland's talking about needing more money, a bigger shop, more success.
Yeah, as if those are the only things that'll make him happy.
And then Jimmy's response is so interesting. He's like, I really enjoy what I do. I have a good business. I love my life. And it's not about, having this huge empire.
It's about appreciating what he already has.
Right. And that's where he brings up this concept of an abundant mindset.
An abundant mindset.
Yeah. He explains it as like this belief that opportunities and success and even happiness, they're not like these limited resources.
It's not like a pie where if someone gets a bigger slice, you get a smaller one.
Exactly. And a big part of this abundant mindset is that you don't constantly feel this pressure to accumulate more just to feel like you're enough.
It's about recognizing that there's enough to go around.
Yeah, like there's potential everywhere and you don't have to be constantly chasing after things.
I know some people listening might be thinking, okay, this sounds a bit too passive. Like if you're not always pushing for more, won't you just fall behind?
I mean, Holland kind of says the same thing. He asks Jimmy straight up, if you're not constantly striving for more, aren't you going to get left in the dust?
The world is competitive.
And Jimmy doesn't shy away from that. He acknowledges that, yeah, of course the world is competitive, but he says that an abundant mindset isn't about becoming complacent or giving up on your goals.
It's not about just sitting back and expecting things to fall into your lap.
No, it's more about changing your fundamental beliefs about how the world works.
Like instead of seeing it as this constant win-lose situation where someone always has to lose for you to win.
You start to see the potential for everyone to succeed, like a rising tide lifts all boats.
So it's not about a lack of ambition, but more about changing your motivation.
Exactly. Instead of being driven by this fear of scarcity, this fear of not having enough.
You're motivated by the possibilities, by the potential for growth and collaboration.
And then, on the flip side, we have Holland, who's a classic example of what Jimmy calls a scarcity mindset.
And you can really see this in how he talks about his life. Like even before Jimmy labels it, he's always worried about losing what he's built. Like if he takes his foot off the gas, even for a second, someone's going to come and take everything from him.
And that fear of loss, that's a huge part of the scarcity mindset.
And Jimmy describes this scarcity mindset as this feeling that there's never enough.
Never enough time, never enough money, never enough opportunities.
And Holland describes this perfectly. He talks about how even when he achieves a goal, he doesn't feel satisfied. He's immediately on to the next thing.
It's like he's on this constant treadmill and there's no finish line.
He's always running, but never really arriving.
And Jimmy points out some really specific signs of this scarcity mindset that he sees in Holland.
Like this constant worry about losing what you have.
Yeah, and feeling jealous when someone else succeeds.
Right, like someone else's success somehow diminishes your own.
And then this tendency to focus on what you don't have instead of appreciating what you do have.
It's like you're always looking at the empty half of the glass.
And the transcript even says that living with this scarcity mindset is exhausting.
Which makes sense. You're always on edge, always worried, always striving.
But the good news is that Jimmy says this isn't a permanent state. It's not like you're stuck with this mindset forever.
You can actually change it.
Yeah, he says you can cultivate a more abundant mindset,
And he lists some pretty amazing benefits that come with this shift.
like seeing opportunities instead of limitations.
And focusing on solutions instead of problems.
And this one's really interesting, building positive relationships instead of seeing everyone as competition.
Like turning those competitors into collaborators.
Right, because when you have an abundant mindset, you realize that there's enough success to go around.
And what's great is that Jimmy gives this really concrete example from his own life with his bakery.
Yeah, he says at first he was really worried about competition, all these other bakeries popping up.
That classic scarcity thinking.
Right, but then he decided to try something different. He actually started reaching out to these other bakers, building relationships with them.
Instead of seeing them as enemies, he saw them as potential allies.
And guess what happened?
What happened?
They started sharing tips, helping each other out during busy periods.
And they all ended up doing better.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
So by collaborating instead of competing, everyone benefited.
And it's a perfect example of how an abundant mindset can lead to unexpected success.
Now, the question is, how do we actually cultivate this abundant mindset? How do we shift our thinking?
Well, Jimmy gives some really practical advice, some simple things you can start doing today.
And the first one is so easy. It's practicing gratitude.
Just taking a few minutes each day to write down 3 things you're grateful for.
It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be as simple as a good cup of coffee or a sunny day.
The point is to train your brain to focus on what you have instead of what you don't have.
And maybe even right now as you're listening, just think of one thing you're grateful for today.
Yeah, just take a moment to appreciate it.
And another thing Jimmy suggests is sharing with others.
Like helping a friend out, mentoring someone, donating to a cause you care about.
Because when you give to others, it actually makes you feel more abundant.
It's like you're proving to yourself that you have enough to share.
Okay, now this next one I think is especially hard for those of us who are, really driven, always striving for perfection.
Yeah, it's about stopping the comparisons,
Because let's face it, we all do it. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others,
especially in this age of social media.
right? Everyone's always presenting their best selves online.
And it's easy to feel like you're not good enough.
So Jimmy says you have to make a conscious effort to stop comparing yourself to others.
He says focus on your own journey, your own progress.
Because everyone's path is different.
And you're only seeing a snapshot of other people's lives.
You're not seeing the struggles, the behind-the-scenes stuff.
So stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20.
And then Jimmy addresses something that I think we all struggle with: fear.
Especially that fear of losing what we've worked so hard for.
And he suggests some really practical techniques for dealing with this fear.
Like mindfulness meditation, deep breathing exercises, even just writing down your thoughts.
Because sometimes just getting those fears out of your head and onto paper can make them feel less overwhelming.
And when you let go of that fear, you create space for new opportunities to come in.
Now, another common feeling that comes with a scarcity mindset is envy.
That feeling of resentment when you see someone else succeed.
But Jimmy suggests a really interesting way to reframe this.
He says, instead of feeling threatened by someone else's success, see it as proof that it's possible.
Like, if they can do it, maybe you can too.
Right, it's about expanding your sense of what's possible.
And he even suggests a really small but powerful action you can take.
What's that?
Congratulate someone when they achieve something.
Just a simple, genuine congratulations.
Whether it's a message, a comment, or just saying it in person.
Because when you do that, you're actively choosing to celebrate their success instead of feeling threatened by it.
It's like you're shifting your energy from scarcity to abundance.
And finally, Jimmy gives this really important piece of advice about timing.
What's that?
He says, stop waiting for the perfect moment.
Because it doesn't exist.
Right, so many people get stuck in this cycle of waiting for everything to be perfect before they take action.
Like waiting for the perfect time, the perfect opportunity, the perfect circumstances.
But the truth is, there's never going to be a perfect time.
Just start now.
Take that first step, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect.
Because action creates momentum, and momentum creates opportunities.
And when you look at everything we've talked about today, the key takeaway is this: success and happiness. They're not limited resources.
They actually grow when you adopt an abundant mindset.
A mindset of possibility, connection, and generosity.
And the podcast we're deep diving into ends with this really powerful visualization exercise.
Oh yeah, I love that part.
So if you're comfortable doing this, maybe just close your eyes for a moment
Take a deep breath.
and imagine your ideal life.
Where are you? What are you doing? How do you feel?
Really try to experience it in your mind and your body.
Yeah.
And now ask yourself this question. What's stopping you from living that life right now?
What are those limiting beliefs, those scarcity-driven thoughts that are holding you back?
Because once you identify them, you can start to challenge them.
And remember, the podcast says that when you start to visualize your success, when you start to feel it as if it's already happening,
You start to make different choices.
you start to take actions that align with that vision.
And gradually you start to create that reality.
It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance, from limitation to possibility.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this final thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
Take one small step today to appreciate something you already have in your life.
Yeah, something you're grateful for.
It could be anything big or small,
Just take a moment to acknowledge it, to appreciate it.
because that's where it all starts.
That's how you shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance.
And from there, anything is possible.
It's a journey, and it starts with that first step.
A step towards gratitude, towards appreciation, towards abundance.
And towards believing in the limitless potential within yourself and the world around you.
So until next time, keep diving, keep exploring, and keep believing.
Keep those mindsets shifting.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.
See you then.
Bye.